In this podcast, Christine Petersen will focus on how our bodies and our minds work and give you various tips and tricks, tools and techniques for understanding yourself, being happier in yourself, and living a better life. Every week, we will discuss different topics that might interest you and help you think differently to then change the way you approach life and yourself. In this podcast, Christine Petersen will focus on how our bodies and our minds work and give you various tips and tricks, tools and techniques for understanding yourself, being happier in yourself, and living a better life. Every week, we will discuss different topics that might interest you and help you think differently to then change the way you approach life and yourself.
Hi, Julie. How are you today?
Hello, Christine. I'm really fine. Thank you. What about you?
I'm very well, thank you. And I'm really looking forward to today's discussion.
Yes, because we're going to speak about word and positivity. So as soon as we speak about talking, I'm happy.
Absolutely. Yes, in fact, today we're going to talk about the small words that make a big difference. The words and the attitudes we have that will make a big impact on the way we see life and our moods.
Cool.
Yes. So let's start off talking about two very small words that make an enormous difference in people's lives. The first word is yes, or is the word but. So yes, but. And the other word is the word and. Yes, and.
Yeah, so I heard that it was very important not to use buts, but can you tell us why?
You went straight into that trap. I just heard you said, but can you tell us why? So wonderful. Let me try and explain. So yes, but, and yes, and. Now, have you heard of improv theatre, improvisational theatre?
Yes, I think it's hilarious.
It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So anybody, if you get a chance, is to go and watch improv theatre. There's these theatres around the world. There's troupes of people who are specialized in this, and it's a fantastic way of having theatre. What it is, in fact, is it's an art form in which 5 or 6 actors arrive on stage and they create a show without a script, without props, without costumes, just them and an empty stage, maybe a couple of chairs. And the basic rule of improv is to always use the words yes and. And the magic, that's the magic phrase, yes and. Because whatever an actor says on stage, for example, I'm lost in the desert, she knows that not only will her colleagues immediately accept and support the idea, yes, you're lost in the desert, they will also add to it. And I'm a palm tree in a mirage. So by constantly accepting whatever is contributed on stage, yes, and then adding to it, and an improv group can build entire plays out of thin air. It's absolutely wonderful to watch. So this is a concept that, of course, we can apply to our lives and our work, and the results can be absolutely amazing. It produces radical changes in your point of view, in your expectations, and in your moods. And basically, if you apply yes and to life, you feel heard, other people feel heard, people feel valued, and people feel accountable. When you say and then you get into the game, you're part of the success or failure of any project, any conversation, or any event that's going on. So let's just take an example. Let's take the difference between yes and yes but. So let's say, Julie, what wonderful weather today. And if you can use the words yes and finish the sentence.
And I'm happy to go for a walk.
Okay, now let's try the other one. Use yes but. So what a wonderful day today, Julie.
But I don't feel like going out.
Exactly. So in fact, what's happening here is we're closing doors if we use the word but. Now, a lot of us use yes, but without even realizing we do it. In my classes, I see students all the time using yes, but. They're not aware of it. And every time that we use the word but, we're closing doors, we're closing our minds, we're closing opportunities. So one easy way to start seeing opportunity and possibility and opening up our attitudes is to simply change from the word but to the word and. There's a book called The Improv Handbook. It's written by Deborah Francis White and Tom Selinsky. They write, saying yes to your partner's idea represents a risk. You have to let an alien idea in. And if you have to build on it, you have to let it influence you. You can't plan your offer in advance. It depends on what your partner offers. Saying yes, but allows us to stay safe, whereas yes, and means learning to trust people and interact with people and to co-create something that could only have arisen from that interaction. We open ourselves to being changed by that other person. I thought that was such a great sentence, or a phrase that they said. So basically, yes and means that you open yourself up. You say yes to whatever the world throws your way, and you're willing to run with it and create from it. Yes and is iterative, it's generative. It helps to acknowledge what has just happened, yes, and it allows you to show that whatever's just happened can contribute to something meaningful in terms of conversation, ideas, or projects.
I loved when you, sorry. When you said, I loved when you mentioned to be part of the game, you know, whether it's in improv or also at work.
And life. And in fact, this is something I've been practicing for the last 15 years, 10 to 15 years, is changing my habit from yes, but to yes, and. It's not always easy. So I try to be quite conscious when I talk. And it really helps. It has really helped me change the way I see life, see the world. So it's a very, very positive reinforcement. You look for opportunity when you say yes, and. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so true. So you said that you are very conscious to use the and not the but. Do you have any other tips?
Yes, a little bit in the same vein is another thing. A lot of people say what they don't want. They focus on what they don't want in life. Oh, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be overweight. I don't want to be unemployed. I don't want to be sad. Now, one really key way of changing your perspective is to focus on what you want. In fact, the human brain has a natural tendency to give weight to and to remember negative experiences or interactions much more than positive ones, because they stand out more. I'll give you an example. If somebody says something nice to you, like, Julie, I love the top you're wearing today. And then I say something like, Julie, I really don't like your shoes. What are you going to remember?
The shoes part.
The shoes part. And yet, equal weight was given to both sentences. So psychologists call this negativity bias. In fact, the psychologist and author Rick Hansen says our brains are wired to look for the bad stuff and fixate on the threat. The brain, so there's another man called Clifford Nass. He's an author and a Stanford professor, and he says the brain handles positive and negative information in different hemispheres of the brain.
Really?
Yeah, really interesting. Negative emotions generally involve more thinking, and the information is processed more thoroughly than positive informations and positive emotions. Thus, we tend to ruminate more, think more about unpleasant events, and use stronger words to describe them than we do happy ones. So bad emotions, bad memories, bad feedback, and bad impressions all have more impact.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, our work lives are filled with ideas, with evidence of how easy it is to fixate on the negative. So for example, when your boss, who normally praises your efforts and your work, expresses concern over just one element in what you're doing, you can't stop thinking about it. Your brain just starts looping. Or a long-time customer blows up on social media when the normal excellent service is not up to par. Or out of 50, you're looking to buy something on Amazon, out of 50 product reviews, you see 2 that are bad, and therefore you don't buy the item.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really how the brain will fixate on the negative. So this is where, if we can start reminding ourselves to think about what we want, so think of the positive rather than the negative, then we change the way we think and the way we focus our brains. And it will help us also to diminish, to reduce the impact that negativity will have on us when it then happens.
Mm-hmm. And then we can save some energy, if I understand correctly.
We can save energy as well. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And
what kind of attitude should we have to do so?
Well, of course, the best attitude is a positive attitude. And this actually takes awareness. It means that we need to be very aware. Now, like all innate biases, it seems that knowing the fact that we tend to look for negativity, it might just be part of a possibility to think more positively and to have more positive interactions. I went and had a look at psychologytoday.com, and they say the difficulty is not that we have negative thoughts. The problem comes when we believe our negative thoughts are true.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing we can do is to think about our thinking habits by paying close attention for a couple of days. So spend the next couple of days being very attentive to the way we think.
Mm-hmm.
Experts recommend to not judge yourself harshly while you're doing this, but just notice your thinking patterns. Look at them objectively and openly. You might want to label your thoughts. So, for example, when my boss gives me corrective feedback, I feel less confident about my work. Now, did she say that your work was bad? No, just that there was another way of doing it. Mm-hmm. So noticing what you're feeling and why you're feeling it is a fantastic step towards letting go of needless worry and negativity. Mm-hmm. Now, once you've spent a couple of days paying attention, you can take the next step to then retrain your brain to be happier and more positive. Now, of course, you can use words such as yes and instead of yes but. That will help enormously in starting to retrain the brain. And in fact, by consciously focusing on and experiencing positive situations more thoroughly, you actually help build new neural structures in your brain. When you experience something pleasant or happy, linger on it, stay with it for at least 5 seconds, just as we would stay with something bad. So make sure that you also try and stay with something good, with something positive. By keeping doing this, whenever something positive comes up, you stay with that thought, you linger on it. By doing it, you rewire your brain, and this will help you notice positive things more often in the future.
That's great.
Isn't it fantastic? It's so easy, so easy.
Yeah, to train.
And in fact, the last thing you can do is just take a step back and consider your negative thoughts. Whenever you have a negative thought, stop and think about it. Is it helpful to you? Is the negative thought true? And is it important?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's neither helpful nor true or important, then throw it away and find a positive one.
Okay. Is there any other tool that you can recommend to be either more positive or keep the good spirits?
Yes, actually, as a final thought, as a final tool for this podcast, I'd like to talk about what we call the circle of concern and the circle of influence. You might have heard of Stephen Covey. He wrote a book called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. In this book, he distinguishes between what we call our circle of concern. So these are things we care about, but we can't control. And our circle of influence. These are the things we care about and we can control, we can impact. Now, what he says is that those who effectively embrace change will focus their time and energy on things they actually have control over, instead of wasting their time and energy on things they don't. This will also make you happier because you're focusing on the positive things, the things you can control. Now, we can't control the economy or the epidemic. Now, and as we react to this lack of control, we tend to focus on the circle of concern. And this takes our energy away. It uses all our energy because we have no control over it. And in fact, the energy focused on the circle of concern is very negative. If you focus on the circle of concern, so the things that worry you but you can't control, just like the epidemic, and you neglect the circle of influence, so the things that worry you that you can control, well, eventually the things that worry you can control, your circle of influence, will get smaller. And this will start adding to feelings of stress and helplessness because you can't change anything in the circle of concern. So what Stephen Covey is saying is worry about the things you can change. Very simple. Focus on what we can impact. He says that a positive and a proactive focus on the things we can control will actually have a secondary effect of increasing our circle of influence. And there are two types of people. There are the people who are proactive, and there are the people who are reactive. The proactive people will focus their efforts on their circles of influence and control. What can I influence? What I control? What I can control. They work on the things that they can do something about. Their health, their children, their business, their work. When you act on your circle of influence, you're able to reduce your stress levels and increase your happiness because you can initiate and influence change. Reactive people will focus their efforts in the circle of concern, the things over which they have little or no control. National debt, terrorism, the weather. Reactive people tend to neglect the issues that are under their control and influence, and their focus is elsewhere, and therefore the things they can influence, control, and control will start to shrink. Really interesting stuff. So basically, to be happier, you should focus only on the things you can change. Everything else, you can notice it, like the weather. It's a nice day today, it's raining today, and say, okay, I can't do anything about it. Let me try and find things I can do something about.
It's so important because you take back your power, in fact. You know, you can do some action.
Exactly, you take back your power. And that leads to happiness. It leads to you feeling more fulfilled. It leads to you feeling more positive. And again, it moves back to the saying what you want rather than what you don't want. You're looking at what you want. You're looking at your circle of control rather than what you don't want, which would be your circle of concern.
So we'll remember to celebrate positivity, but what is the last words or the last tip you want to share with us?
So
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. You've been listening to A Toolkit for a Better Life with Christine Petersen and Julie Charef. For more information and details on how to contact us, please see the podcast description.